In our next guest, another one of my former congressional colleagues, Michael Patrick Flanagan, who today is president of Flanagan Consulting in Washington, D.C. He joins us from Newsmax, Washington. As you can see, live television, actions being taken to get that done. So
we're working on it.
We believe. You hear us?
Yep.
Good.
I'm just hearing you now, JD. There you go.
Okay,
great.
pal. Well, great. Let's talk some about that vote yesterday, and specifically Speaker Boehner summing up the debate.
What a terrific speech. Huh? He quoted all 22 times, and you can see Nancy Pelosi squirming with every new quotation. It was well worth watching.
Overall, with the House Republican Conference and that unpleasantness that marked the start of this new Congress, where the Speaker faced the biggest uprising for an incumbent Speaker and an incumbent majority party since the Civil War era. Did that speech and that floor action yesterday on Homeland Security, did that heal the breach in the conference?
Well, I think the conference is not really broken. I don't think there's a breach to heal. I think there's a strong divergence of opinion. I think the Republican right, the Tea Party guys who are right on almost everything, and who the polls support as being right on almost everything, can't be ignored and won't be ignored. Partially because of their numbers, partially because they're right. And I think Speaker Boehner agrees with them 95% of the time. And on the three occasions I can think of where they diverge, it's more in degree than in absolute view on it. And I think Boehner is going to be with them on most everything they need done.
Do you think this got him back into good graces, though? Because it was just, what, a couple weeks ago when there was like 9 people vying to unseat Boehner?
Yeah, I think some of the leaders of the Republican right sometimes get deeply involved in the need for a purge more than a need for a victory. And I think their own membership pulls them back. And that's why there are only 9 votes instead of 100 votes against John. And I think that they all remember they're Republicans. They all agree most of the time on most of the issues. And they'll move forward together pretty happily.
Well, as you analyze that, Mike, I just have to point out that last Congress, the Speaker got very exasperated and went into press conferences and engaged in some name calling against Tea Party conservatives. Isn't a principle of politics dance with them what brung you? Didn't the Speaker
exactly
start bringing this on himself with his frustration there?
I think maybe yes. There's an old way of doing business in Washington, and that's to build coalitions and compromise. A lot of the Tea Party folks, the conservatives, are new to this. They don't follow that. They think if we have the votes, let's vote and let's win and let's cram it down. You wind up often with bad legislation doing that, even though you're coming from a position of being absolutely right on the issue. The legislation, though, is made of words, not of thoughts, and so you have to have lots of opinion. Boehner, I think, is kind of coming into his own with that group and learning to work with them better. And they're learning to work with him. And I think they're going to work together better in this Congress than they did in the last. But you're right. The Speaker did bring on some of this himself. And I think everybody's learned their lessons and they'll play better this year.
Everybody has learned their lessons. We shall see, Michael Patrick Flanagan, and we're going to see you on the other side of the break because there's another relationship important among Republicans, the relationship of the House to the Senate. And given the proclivity of some senators to move away from the results of elections and proclaim their independence from the party and from the caucus, it could be interesting there. Tell you what, Mike, you stay right there. We will be back to talk with Michael Patrick Flanagan about more going on Capitol Hill right after we take this time out here on America's Forum. To call again on my former colleague in the House of Representatives, former Congressman Michael Patrick Flanagan of Illinois, joining us from Newsmax, Washington. So, Mike, these travel restrictions lifted by the administration starting tomorrow. Announcement, a month ago by the president that he wanted to reopen diplomatic relations with Cuba.
Yeah, it's a sad business. For decades, we've worked hard to try and bring what Kennedy called that imprisoned island to heal. We've kept them broke and kept the government unafraid, or kept the government afraid, having to turn to communist Russia and other for help. They've barely been supported over that time. They've teetered on the edge for years. We've pumped millions into Radio Marti and an assortment of other ways to make sure that the Cuban people know that we're on their side. And then, on what essentially is the 1 yard line before Castro can jump into a grave and his brother with him, we surrender and say, okay, we're going to open relations and basically give in to the fact that you're a dictatorship and we'll deal with you anyway. I don't understand it. I don't think anyone really does understand it. And hopefully the Senate will find its way on this and will be able to show that it has what it takes to stand up to the president. The Senate is more capable of dealing with these foreign policy matters than the House, and hopefully they can do this and come to good agreement on it.
So, Michael, you see this as a surrender, but would it be fair to say, because some would argue that the Embargo Act never worked?
I don't agree with that. If the embargo had not worked, Cuba would be a flourishing place today, taking its place among the dictatorships of the world with what George W. Bush called the axis of evil, and it's not. It's a broke little place where they have to imprison people regularly, or where they have to have executions regularly to keep in line. They don't flourish at all, and it's partially because they can't find any friends in the world, and it's majorly because we keep it that way. If we open up relations with it and legitimize it, and this is what the Cubans in this country fear and the rest of us do, then we endorse it and we endorse their behavior. And we can't do that. It's morally wrong, and it makes no sense from a foreign policy standpoint.
And what was the deal? We were supposed to see freedom for, 50 plus political prisoners from the Castro brothers? Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they've been released yet, have they?
No, and it's funny. I talked with my friend George Ryan, the former governor of Illinois. Had some trouble, and after his time as Secretary of State, and he's back now with us. And he was a big fan of Cuba at the time, and he caused a lot of ruffles in the Republican ranks about his wanting to normalize relations with Cuba. And I asked him about this, and George said, no, it was only after certain preconditions were met that he was even remotely interested in doing something like that and having trade with them. This president doesn't seem to be interested in that. Preconditions, who cares about that? We just want normalized relations with folks that he thinks we ought to be dealing with. The president has never fully articulated to my satisfaction why Cuba holds such interest for him. And I'd like to hear why we need to have normalized relations with that vicious dictatorship. I don't know why, and I don't think anyone else can state why.
And certainly I wouldn't offer a response in defense of the president other than to say, and you know this as someone who grew up in Chicago, when the president was able to use that Cook County political machine and really take it nationwide to say he was going to fundamentally change America, whatever we think of the decisions, he has moved to fundamentally change America, from socialized medicine to trade with Cuba, and now to a much more cozy relationship with the Iranians, who, of course, are seeking nuclear weapons. Michael Patrick Flanagan, as you lay that out, a whole lot of other things we could talk about, but our time is short. Mike, we thank you for joining us from Washington, D.C. When we come back, aviation expert Todd Curtis about that ill-fated Air Asia flight and its black boxes.